Hello, and welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection of humans and technology. Today, we have a very special guest, and that is Nir Eyal, the author of Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products. Hello, Nir.
Hi.
And, of course, as always, I have Susan Weinschenk. Hello, Susan.
Hello.
And I am Guthrie. So, today, we're going to talk about a bunch of fun stuff like we always do, but especially because we have Nir on, we're going to talk about persuasion. So, both kind of Susan and Nir, I would say, are, you guys are both experts on persuasion. I think I can say that with confidence.
Thanks.
So, yeah, you're welcome.
You could have called us a lot of other things, so I'll take it. That's fine.
Yeah, I'm going to go supreme experts in their field. No one is better. So persuasion. And just so the audience knows, a little bit before we went live, we were just asking kind of if they had anything to talk about, and I was told that they could actually talk for hours and hours and hours just on this topic. So hopefully we can cut it down into like 50 minutes.
You know what's really interesting too about, because usually when I'm talking to other people about this stuff, or like we had another guest speaker on, and we had a lot in common, but they kind of had their area of expertise and I had mine. But when I was just rereading your book, Nir, and I felt like we talk and think about the same things, but we use a really different system of knowledge about it. So it's almost like I have to translate. Like I feel like I'm translating a foreign language. It's like, okay, he's talking about tribe, and I call that, like I had all these different phrases, and I just found it so interesting that we read the same research and studied the same stuff and then came up with a slightly different, pretty different system.
Right. Well, I think some of it is trying to translate some very old, established, really good research into a language that folks can absorb. That was my big challenge, in that there was so much out there that I wanted to help product managers, product designers use. And my big problem was, there's just so much, right? How do we boil the ocean down to something that people can actually absorb? And that's sometimes I had to take academic speak and turn it into something that people hopefully could absorb.
So, Nir, why don't you just tell the audience just a little bit about you? Mm-hmm. If they're not familiar with you and your work.
Sure.
And your book, Hooked.
Yeah. So
which everyone should purchase. We do lots of product placement here, so if there's anything you need to plug, if it comes, you just feel
actually,
free.
You do. If before we even start talking about the book, you need to. If you don't have the book, just go get the book, because it's great. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, and then if you would tell us just like you have this wonderful system in the book. You have the 4 pieces. Maybe just say a few words.
Sure.
About that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to start, I'm such a huge fan of your work, and at my last company, I read your work and I applied much of that. And so, I have a lot to thank you for in terms of inspiring me down this path of exploring consumer psychology and user behavior. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. And I'm glad. See, Guthrie, I gave him $20 before we started. He would say
huge debt of gratitude. I mean, you've done so much for the whole industry in terms of helping us all understand how our users think and what makes them do the things they do. I'm looking at I have all your books here on my bookshelf that I'm looking at right now. So they were incredibly helpful over the years. And where I applied them was at my last company was at the intersection of gaming and advertising. And I spent a lot of time in these two industries that, run off of persuasion. Advertisers don't spend all that money for their health, and game designers, man, that there's no industry that understands how to change human behavior better than the gaming industry. And at the intersection of those two industries, I learned a bunch. But what I found was that people would apply these techniques without really understanding why they worked. They just kept doing what their competition was doing or what they had done before that worked. And then, so when that company was acquired, the last company I helped found, I had some time on my hands, and I really, was fascinated by this field and was looking to figure out how I could explore more specifically about habits. That was really my fascination. I read Charles Duhigg's book, Power of Habit, and loved the book. It was really well told, and boiled down some of this research into a really fun read. My problem after reading the book was that I was trying to figure out, okay, but what do I do with this? How do I build for habit? And so what I wanted to do was to distill down what I had learned at my previous company and some of this great habit research out there into kind of a how-to guide, because I had this hypothesis that as the screen size shrinks, that as we go from desktop to laptop to mobile and now to wearable, habits become more important because there's just less real estate to trigger people to do things. And so, if you're not, there's some amazing data out there around how important it is to be on the home screen of a phone, for example, that, if you're not on the home screen, you basically don't exist. More than that, it's really only a few apps on the home screen that even matter. So if you're not the kind of product that's used with little or no conscious thought out of habit, it's very difficult to make it in a world where the screens keep shrinking and eventually disappear. Right now, we're moving into the voice activated interface with Alexa and Siri, and I think that's only going to continue to be the case. That you've got to be top of mind. You have to be the first to mind solution, or it's very, very difficult for people to remember to use your product. So, given that hypothesis, given that thesis, I thought I was going to start another company. But then the more I got into this research around how to design for habits, I kind of started blogging and found this elegant model that was helpful to me in evaluating businesses that I might want to start and eventually invest in these different companies. And so I just started blogging about it. And then the blogging turned into a course at Stanford, at the Graduate School of Business, at the design school there. And then from that course, became this book. And
I love the way Guthrie, I love the way he just throws out, I blogged, and then it turned into a course at Stanford. There were
I'm pretty sure that's usually how it works, right?
Yeah, that's how it worked for me. I blogged, and then I was at Stanford teaching.
Well, the way that happened was, so I went to Stanford for my MBA, and a marketing professor that I got very close to there emailed me a few years after I started blogging and said, "Hey, I've been reading your blog. I really like it. Why don't we do a course together?" And so that's how that relationship happened. And then from that, I went from the business school over to the design school, where I've been teaching about once a year now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talk about the you have this in the book. You draw a circle. Or is it a square? But you put a circle through. You show the path through.
Right. The hook model.
Yeah. So you give us the 3-minute version of the hook model.
Sure. So the pattern that I saw repeated in these habit forming products, when you think about Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and WhatsApp and Slack, the pattern that I saw repeated time and time again is this 4-step process I call the hook model, which boils down into a trigger, and there are 2 types of triggers: external triggers and internal triggers. Then the action phase of the hook, which is all about the simplest behavior the user does in anticipation of a reward. Then the reward itself, and not only is it just a reward, not only are you giving the user what they want, but you're also you implementing what's called a variable reward, either to increase the variability or to take a situation that's inherently variable and give the user greater autonomy and control over something that's already variable. And then finally, the investment phase, and this is critical, this is something I found in all these products that I studied, was that these products always get better with use by asking for an investment after the reward. So either by collecting data, accruing followers, reputation scores, contributing content, things that make the product better and better with use. And that's really different. I mean, that's really a sea change when it comes to, if you consider products offline, until now have had a really tough time changing quickly, right? If you think about manufactured goods, right, in industrial economies, when you build something, it rolls down the production line, and then to change it takes years to retool it. Well, the products that we use online today, all of these things are adapting to us, right? They're perfectly contingent. As we use them, they change for us and we change for them. And so that's a really big deal, because that means that our products get better and better and better the more we use them. And so that's that critical investment phase that does what I call stores value. It gets better with use, and it loads the next trigger. So for example, when you post something to Facebook, or you follow somebody on Twitter, or you like something or pin something on Pinterest, all of those things give the company a good reason to reach back out to you with an external trigger, with some kind of prompt to action, telling you to come back and use the product again, and of course pass through the 4 steps of the hook, so that over time, eventually, by passing through these 4 steps of the hook, they don't need any external triggers at all, right? If you noticed, you never see a commercial for Snapchat on television, even though it's valued at a $15 billion company. There was no Super Bowl ads for Twitter. There was no, they don't spend a lot of money on advertising like companies of their size usually do, because they don't trigger us through these external triggers after a while. What they rely upon are internal triggers, which are these typically emotions, negative emotions. They cater to these itches in our day-to-day life that, with little or no conscious thought, we turn to these products to alleviate that itch. So if we're bored, we check YouTube or Reddit or the news. If we're unsure about something, we Google it. And if we're bored or lonely, I should say, we're on Facebook with little or no conscious thought. And so that's the ultimate goal of these habit-forming products, is to attach to these internal triggers.
So Nir, can you just give an example of the hook model, a practical example for our users?
Sure.
Listeners?
Yeah. So let's take, Facebook just 2 days ago reported their quarterly numbers. They blew it out of the water, and that's just top of mind. Let's do Facebook. So Facebook's external triggers would be the notifications, the emails. Those are triggers that tell you what to do next. That's an external trigger. The action is to open the app or click on the link in the website and start scrolling through the newsfeed. That's the action. Very, very simple action to get a reward. The reward is this reward of the tribe. It's a social reward that comes from scrolling and scrolling through your newsfeed, and of course it's variable, right? What videos might I see? What are the comments going to say? How many likes does something get? It's basically an online slot machine in this feed mechanic. And then finally, the investment phase is every time you post something, you like something, you comment on something, you follow or friend somebody. All of these things are forms of investment that make the product better with use. They customize the product for you. So if you were to log into my Facebook account, it actually wouldn't be very interesting for you, because it's all been customized based on my data. And it loads the next trigger to prompt me to action in the future, so that when someone does something regarding something I've posted to Facebook, or someone I've friended on Facebook, now I have this new external trigger which prompts me through the hook once again, until eventually I begin to associate the use of Facebook with anytime I'm feeling lonely or seeking connection or boredom, these negative valence states that prompt me to use the product even without an external trigger. And that's how the habit's formed.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a great model, and you're making it sound like, hey, really simple, makes a lot of sense. But in the book, of course, you've covered pretty much the entire field of psychology. It's like, which is what I felt. I have the book How to Get People to Do Stuff, in which I cover, and I have 7 drivers, and that was what was so interesting for me, was mapping. When I went and reread it, I'm mapping my 7 drivers to your process, and all the 7 drivers I have are in your your model, but like I said, in just kind of a different and interesting way. So it is simple in a way, but on the other hand, it's got this whole body of behavioral science and behavioral economics and psychology, social psychology, and all of that is built in there. I have a question for you, though. Yeah. We've got, we can see, like, you, and in the book you talk about, you give great examples about, Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Pinterest, and all these apps, a lot of us know about. And, the you were just describing about Facebook, and there's a number of apps that are doing this very well. But my sense is, tell me if this is wrong or right, my sense is that most of these apps kind of got there by trial and error. Like they didn't, sit down and say, okay, here's what we'll do. So do you think, but have you had experience with, have you been consulting with companies or with the own companies you've had where you've actually sat down from the beginning and said, let's map out how we're going to do the 4 pieces?
So you're absolutely right. That these products and services didn't use the hook model because the hook model didn't exist back then. But I think so 2 things there. One, I used a technique that Dan Ariely calls advanced hindsight, right? Where I was looking for patterns in these companies to try and figure out what I could learn. And then, unfortunately, at the social science, we can't do this kind of stuff with petri dishes to figure out, hey, let's do an A/B test. If Facebook used this technique versus didn't use this technique, what would have happened? Although I think when you look at Facebook's competitors that didn't make it, you can actually see where their hooks were deficient. Mm-hmm. But then, after I did that analysis of these companies, trying to figure out why they worked and why others didn't, after it was codified, after I actually put it down in print, it's been really wonderful to see how companies have actually used it from the get-go. Great example, probably the best example, is back in 2012, I got an email from this kid who was working at a company that he was just, he was okay with. He wasn't crazy about it, and he's kind of bored with his job. And he emails me and says, hey, look, I put you on my list of 13 people I want to meet in 2013. And there were all these, tech luminaries like Eric Ries and Steve Blank and all these people in famous people in tech. And I was on his list. And I said, look, I live here. Let's just go have a burger together. And so we sat down together, and his name was Ryan Hoover. And he said, look, I really like your writing. I read it on TechCrunch, and I've seen you around, and I really like what you're working on. How can I help you? I have some extra time on my hands. I'm a little bored. What can I do to help? And I said, look, I've been blogging now for a couple of years, and some of my readers are asking me for a book. They want something they can share with their teams. Can you take my blog posts, put them in a Google Doc, and help me edit them into something that's kind of cohesive for maybe like a 15-page PDF? Well, I didn't realize how many articles I had written, and so when he was done, we had a 150-page book, and he helped me figure out, hey, here's the holes. You should write an article about this, or there's a gap here and there. And so after this project was done, Ryan uses the hook model and comes to me and says, look, I have an idea for how to use the hook model to build this product I want to work on called Product Hunt. And Product Hunt today is, the Silicon Valley darling, is doing unbelievably well. Just
that's so funny. Just about, I don't know, Guthrie, when was it? Like maybe a month or 2 ago? One of my books made it to the top of Product Hunt.
So is that right?
Yeah, that's
excellent.
Funny.
Yeah. So they just raised $6.2 million from Andreessen Horowitz, and I, of course, invested as soon as Ryan said he wanted to start the company. And I didn't care what he was doing. If he knew the hook model, and if it was Ryan, I was in. And so that's a great example because we worked on the book together.
Yeah,
and nobody knows the hook model second to me better than Ryan. And there's been other companies. I invested in a company that was just in the New York Times. That's an education company called Kahoot. That 1/3, I couldn't believe this statistic, 1/3 of American students between 1st and 5th grade are using this product. It's doing unbelievably well. Again, designed with the hook model. Another company, 7 Cups, is a Y Combinator company that services the psychotherapy market. Started by a guy by the name of Glenn Moriarty, who was a psychotherapist, and found that too many people weren't getting therapy because it was hard. Right? It's hard to get therapy. It's expensive. It's time consuming. There's social stigma. So he builds this amazing app that with one click of a button, so the internal trigger is loneliness, seeking connection. When you're feeling down, you open the app with one click, you're instantly connected to somebody for free. Doesn't cost a dime. The variable reward is that it's a social reward, right? Rewards of the tribe around this other person that's trained to help you. And then the investment, and here's where it gets really interesting, is that the more you are a listener through this, the more you are listened to through this app, you actually have the opportunity to be trained as a listener yourself. That becomes the investment in the product. And it's amazing. They just released this peer-reviewed study that found that using 7 Cups as a listener is as effective as traditional psychotherapy. It's really amazing. And so that's an example of how we can use these hooks, not just for, these frivolous games and silly apps, but how we can actually do good. We can help people improve their lives by helping them build these healthy habits.
So you're putting together a mutual fund, right? Made up of companies who've all applied Hook, right?
I wish.
Then we can invest
Yeah.
in that mutual fund, right?
I should. I mean, I personally invest in these companies, but maybe I should start a
Yeah,
fund
would
for
you
everyone
please?
else.
Because I would like to
Yeah, we
put some
should.
money
Let's
on
do
too.
it.
So, all right, let's take a. Now, you mentioned, instead of doing this, just for kind of silly apps to help with our boredom, you said, okay, some of these apps are doing good for people. So I want to.
Oh, I can give you an example.
Yeah.
Farmville.
Yes, and Nir talks about
Huh.
Farmville
Huh.
in his
Poor
book.
Farmville.
Yeah.
Well, and poor Farmville. So Nir, you talk about the problem per se, right, with Farmville and why it didn't last.
Yeah, it's a great question. I get that question all the time of, look, smarty pants, if variable rewards, what happened, right? Didn't Farmville have a good enough hook? And Farmville did have a great hook for a while. It was the fastest growing game in history for a while. Zynga at one point was worth $10 billion. Now it's worth a little less than $1 billion, so it lost over 90% of its value. What happened? Well, I'll tell you exactly what happened. If you remember the history of Zynga, the makers of Farmville, they put out Farmville, unbelievable hit, and then the next hit after Farmville was, I think it was Cityville, and then Frontierville, and then Chefville, and then the next Ville, and the next Ville, and users started to figure out that it was just the same game again and again and again. And when it comes down to those variable rewards, it's all about being new and novel. And what users figured out was that what was once variable and fun became predictable and mundane. And as soon as that hook lost the variable reward, there wasn't any reason to stick around. So that's an example of how the hook kind of disappeared. A good hook disappeared out of that product because they couldn't keep up that variability. They just, they kind of got lazy, started replicating the same exact formula again and again and again, and couldn't adapt to something else. They couldn't change the format. And we've seen this time and time again, right? For a while, everybody was playing Flappy Birds, and before that, Super Mario Brothers and Pac-Man. And the reason we don't keep playing those experiences is because they are examples of what I call finite variability. Experiences that the more we engage with them, the more predictable they become. And this is, we see this in news. We see this in books and movies. We watch a movie, even if it's a great film, we don't leave the theater and then come right back around, buy another ticket and watch the movie again, because we know what's going to happen. The variability is gone. We understand the happy ending, how it concludes, and how everything is tied in a nice bow at the end of the movie, and that's it. So. And
you talk in the book about one way to kind of avoid that problem. Mm-hmm. For instance, if you're a game maker, is when it's a game that is played with other people,
right?
It's kind of constantly introducing some variability because the other people, they're not always going to do exactly the same thing, and you're playing with a different person and a different person.
Well, exactly. So that's infinite variability. These products, like, if you think about social networks and LinkedIn and these products where information about our friends is much more variable. They're going on vacations. They're posting interesting articles. They're giving us pictures of their pugs. There's much more variability involved with this social reward as opposed to just a quest reward. And when you think about really great video games that have lasted the test of time, when you think of World of Warcraft, World of Warcraft is not about the game. Right? It's not about slaying some evil monster. It's about your guild. It's about playing with other people who you care about together as a team. That's a much more long-lasting experience.
So there's one. I'd like to ask you a question because it ties together Farmville, Facebook, and World of Warcraft.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people who played Farmville, been on Facebook, and also played World of Warcraft. I know a lot of people who have quit Farmville, quit Facebook, and quit World of Warcraft. And what the same thing was told to me every single time was that it was addictive. Mm-hmm. So in the case of Farmville, and I did this for, a month. I think everyone did. Right? Like I was doing it. And I was like, this is so addicting. This is
too
a waste
much
of time. I can't do it. Okay.
Right.
So, and so they like, they have to quit like it's a drug.
Right.
Okay. Facebook. I know a lot of people, especially my age, who have left Facebook. I've been told by my friends that they start scrolling down the feed and they literally can't stop themselves.
Yeah.
So they purposely do not go on Facebook because it's at least 15 minutes or more and they just can't stop.
Right.
And so I know a number of people who have just deleted Facebook, and part of that was because of the time. Part of it, but it was also a mix of, privacy and blah, blah, blah. But a lot of it was because of the time. And then World of Warcraft. I know a number of people who played for years and then quit because to be in a guild requires, your 4 hours a day, and it's very demanding, and they couldn't keep up with life. So in all these cases, you have these ridiculously successful products. And don't forget, Farmville did have social interaction at some level, but there's a line, just like kind of gambling, where people realize it's a problem and then they stop. And some people don't. They're not able to. But there's like a level of addictiveness. Yeah. So do you have any thoughts on it? Is it a curve where on one side of the curve it's not rewarding enough. And on the other side of the curve, it's so rewarding people have to make a conscious decision to stop participating.
Yeah.
So is there a sweet spot?
This is music to my ears.
Okay.
I love that because one of the questions that I oftentimes get, particularly for people who haven't read the book, is, aren't you teaching people how to addict other people? And that's a dead giveaway that someone hasn't read the book, because I talk about in the book how there's a difference between an addiction and a habit, that the clinical definition of an addiction is a persistent dependency on a behavior or substance that hurts the user. So it's something we want to stop doing but can't stop doing. A habit, on the other hand, is simply a behavior done with little or no conscious thought. And unlike addictions, which are always bad, we have habits that are either good or bad. And I really believe that we can use these habits for good, that we can help people live better lives through their technology products by forming these healthy habits. And in fact, I just gave you some of these examples of companies I've invested in that I think really do improve our lives. To put this in perspective, the real problem is not that a few companies like Facebook or Zynga or World of Warcraft, that they figured out how to hook people. The real problem is that that's too small, that too few companies have figured out how to hook people. That in fact, when you think about how difficult it is to get anything done with a government agency or with a local business. I mean, God, I want to tear my hair out trying to use websites for people who, want to interact with their customers, want to help people do things they want to do, but for lack of good design, these products are awful, right? They don't suck us in, they just suck. So that's a problem. And that's the big problem here, is that far too many companies don't utilize this psychology of human behavior to make their products better. However, there are some products out there, as you mentioned, that do kind of seem to suck people in to the point where it's difficult to stop using them. But my answer to this question of, well, aren't you teaching people how to addict other folks, is that for the vast majority of people, where the stats are telling us between 95 to 99% of people do exactly what you did. They use it for a while, they enjoy it, and then they say, you know what? Enough. Too much. This isn't helping me do the things I really want to do in life, and they uninstall. They just stop. So that's a really important lesson in two regards. One, as the app maker, you have an incentive to not burn people out, to not make your products so over the top, life-sucking that people can't continue to use them. That's one thing, right? That we have to care about the user's time and not hurt the user by trying to conquer every spare minute. And two is that, look, human beings are adaptable. We're going to be all right. This technology is not going to turn us into techno zombies. The fear around this technology is scripted. It happens every time there's a new technology, particularly when it's the young people who are using these video games that are rotting their brains. Really what happens time and time again is that we adapt. People figure out, hey, you know what? This isn't helping me. I'm using this too much. I just did this with Snapchat. I got really into Snapchat for a few weeks, and then I said to myself, well, this is becoming a burden. I feel preoccupied with what I should be posting on Snapchat. And I stopped. I realized it's just not serving me, and I don't use it as much as I was back then. And I think that that's what most people do. We adapt when we are harmed through the use of a product. Now, some people, however, can't adapt. Some
Yeah.
people
Well,
are
what
more,
about the woman who that was in the news today who is suing
yeah, for
Snapchat because she for they have the feature where it'll tell you how fast you're moving when you take a picture.
right, right. I
Video.
just saw that.
And
Yeah,
she had an accident, um,
Car accident.
car accident while seeing, if it knew how fast she was going. You know what?
yeah.
And so she's suing Snapchat. But what I find really interesting is that as she's on the stretcher,
Hmm.
she does a selfie on Snapchat.
I just saw that. Yeah, that says "lucky to be alive" with her in a stretcher.
And then she's going to sue Snapchat, but she's after the accident, she's right after the accident, she's using Snapchat. So
Right,
you
right.
got to really wonder
What's going on? And by the way, she was going 107 miles per hour, as stated in the lawsuit. So I think this is hysteria, and this happens every time there's some new technology that the old people fear that the young people are melting their brains over. And this has happened with the telegraph. It happened with the telephone. It happened with novels. Every time there's a new technology, we have this techno fear as this knee-jerk reaction that says, you see, it's the technology's fault. And really, this technology is a tool that can, of course, tools can be misused. And I think that's what's going on here with a woman who thinks it's a good idea to go 107 miles per hour while on her phone. So I'm not a legal scholar, but this lawsuit sounds pretty ridiculous. But what I do think we do have a moral obligation to do something about, is not the vast majority of people who can put this stuff away, and maybe at times they go overboard, but most of us can self-regulate. There is one area of people that I think we do have to do something, and I want to pressure the tech industry to do more, which is people who are actually addicted. That we have to remember, addiction is nothing new, right? Addiction has been around for a very, very long time, and there's always an underlying psychoses around addiction, right? These are folks that have something else going in their lives, and like all drugs, they're using these products as a disassociative tool. They're using a product to get out of an uncomfortable reality. I mean, that's the nature of these addictions. Addictions don't come from anywhere. In fact, if you shot heroin, if you are not looking for escape, you're probably going to get sick. Dan Rather actually did this experiment back in the 1960s. He literally shot himself up with heroin, and he puked, and he didn't feel good, and he never did it again. In fact, millions of Americans have disomorphine plugged into them when they when they break their arm or something bad happens. Doesn't mean they get addicted to it. The few that do get addicted have some kind of other problems going on, some other issues, and that's what happens with technology tools. The good news is that for the first time, the upside of all this data being collected on us is that for the first time we could do something about it. And that's what keeps me up at night. That if you distill alcohol, that's a potentially addictive product. We all know about how terrible alcoholism is. But you can have this moral cover of saying, well, we don't know who the alcoholics are. How do we know who's abusing our product? But these companies like Clash of Clans and like Zynga and these makers, and frankly, every Las Vegas casino that uses a loyalty card, they know how much each and every person is gambling, is using their products. So for those people who are just way off the charts, right, what the industry calls whales, we could do something, and I think we have a moral imperative to do something about people who we know are unhealthfully addicted. Not in terms of money, right? If you're somebody who's crazy rich and that's how you choose to spend your money, I'm not going to get in your way. But if we know that you're spending just an inordinate amount of time on a product or service, give me some number. What's a number that just doesn't make sense? 40 hours a week, 50 hours, 60 hours a week? There's got to be some number that says, hey, you know what, Facebook, you should step in to someone who's using the product that much and see if they need help. And I want the industry to do that. I've written about this for a few years now. I want people to adopt what I call a use and abuse policy that says there's some number at which point we step in and help you because what you're doing here cannot be healthy. Let us see if you need help.
Just do it. You could just use like 2 or 3 standard deviations.
Right.
The top.
Right.
Boom.
In fact, Stack Overflow already does this. On Stack Overflow, if you use Stack Overflow more than 20 hours a week, you get a message and you cannot accrue any more points on Stack Overflow. Why? Because what Jeff Atwood told me, one of the co-founders of Stack Overflow, that he wanted Stack Overflow to be a place that improves your life but doesn't become your life. And so I think more companies should do exactly that.
Wow. How is anybody doing it besides Stack
No.
Overflow?
No, nobody's doing it right now. And I'm trying to figure out how do we create a movement to pressure folks into doing this without being, techno alarmists and saying all tech is bad. It's just this one criteria of people who really can't control their behavior and need some help.
So how would you do that? What would you? I mean, you said how Stack Over. I mean, what would Facebook do? What would Snapchat do?
Oh, I can give you a perfect example. So there's a bunch of ways. Way one, of course, is you just send a message. Hey, how's it going? That's maybe the more social awkward conversation.
Worried about you?
Yeah, that's a little socially awkward. But let me give you an example for Facebook, okay?
Yeah.
I use an Android phone. I have Facebook. Every morning, I get updates that say, 14 people have uploaded a picture. Or, do you know this person? And I have looked through the Facebook app 4 or 5 times to turn these notifications off, and I cannot find where to do so. But there's a simple point where Facebook automatically generates everything, and it's automatic for every user. If you reach a certain level, they could just slowly and unobtrusively scale back the level of notifications and scale back the level of updates that your feed receives. It could be completely behind the scenes, and the net effect would be it would just become less interesting, and it would force the person to back off.
Right. So if they did say, hey, look, we see that you're using the product in the amount that has raised some red flags. Here's some ways to decrease your usage. Let's make it easier for you to dial back in some way or another. I think that it would actually make Facebook better. We all know the person who's on Facebook way too much and pollutes our news feeds with all the crap they keep posting and sharing. I think it would actually make the product better. I'm not really worried about Facebook doing this. I think if we can get the attention of someone high enough up at Facebook with a little bit of public pressure around helping folks disconnect a little bit more, I think this would happen. What I'm really interested to see is what happens to the companies where unhooking the addicts is an existential threat to the business. Right? What happens when the gaming companies that rely on not, the few people who occasionally play,
right,
but the very small minority of people, the 1 or 2% who are playing all the time but are providing about 99% of the revenue.
Right.
That's going to be interesting. What do those companies do that rely upon not just casual users but addicts?
So I have a follow-up question for you. And it's a gaming question. Microtransactions, the future of video games or a blight on society?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Microtransactions. Are they the future of video games or a blight on society?
What is a microtransaction?
Oh, sorry. Okay. So there are the traditional way that people play games. Think of checkers. You purchase a physical checkers box or a chess set at a store. You purchase it once, the game is yours for unlimited plays and for the end of time. So the recent trend that's been happening, especially with apps, is instead of making one payment, buying the game straight out, people have experimented, of course, like World of Warcraft does it's a subscription-based service, right? So you pay a couple, $20 a month or whatever it is to have access to it. Okay, that's one model. But the new model is what's called microtransactions. So the way that works is generally, if it's like an app, the game is free. But then if you actually want to play the game successfully or cheat up a couple points or a couple levels or get an extra something, and in some cases, in order to really actually compete in the game at all, you have to make small little transactions over an extended period of time.
Right. So the whole freemium model. I don't necessarily think these things are bad. I think what they've done is, they've moved the ability curve. They made it easier for you to pay. And of course, they've used all kinds of interesting psychological hacks like loss aversion, that if you don't pay now, your crops are going to die or whatever it is. And so they use a lot of these techniques. And I don't think any of these things are bad. I think, in fact, they make the games engaging. They make the games fun. And of course, we don't want it any other way, right? Like it's ridiculous to expect these games to make your games worse, make your products harder to use, so that they're not as fun. That's not going to happen. And for most people, this isn't a problem. I mean, persuasion, everything that I write about when it comes to persuasive design and habit formation, this is an art on the margin, right? This is never going to make someone do something they don't want to do. Persuasion is not coercion. Coercion is when you get people to do things they don't want to do. And frankly, I don't know how to do that. And it would be unethical to do so. All of this stuff is helping people do things they want to do, but for lack of good design, don't do. So that's really where a lot of this stuff sits. However, if you're the kind of person who's just going overboard, right? If you really have an addiction, or where you are using the product to an extent that is unhealthy, and we should be able to see that based on your usage patterns. In those cases, I do think, as I mentioned before, we do have an obligation. And to put it in perspective too, I think, as much as I think the gaming companies do some pretty sketchy things, if you call a gaming company, if you call Apple or Google, right, which all of these gaming companies are built on these days, the vast majority are occurring on one of these two platforms. If you call Apple or Google and say, hey, look, I played Clash of Clans, and those bastards addicted me, I want my money back, they give you your money back, right? There's
Even
no
for
questions
microtransactions
asked. Of course, they give it all back.
Oh,
they
wow.
will charge back your card. The game makers hate that. They don't want me to tell you that. But they will, with very little argument, they have to give you your money back, because Apple is not going to risk their reputation for the sake of Clash of Clans. They don't care enough about Clash of Clans to risk their reputation on that. Now, that to me doesn't bother me so much, because the money you get back. What bothers me more is that the time that you put into the app, you never get back. And so, unlike in Las Vegas, where if you lose your money in a slot machine, that money's gone. You're not getting it back. That's a different line than these app makers cross, where really what they're taking from people is their time.
So I think I have some ideas of how to move this forward. First of all, Guthrie and we were just over in Stockholm, Sweden recently, and we met a woman there who is pretty high up in Facebook. Right, Guthrie?
Yes.
Maybe we can contact her. Now, she's on the business side, not on the consumer side, but she would know who we could talk to.
Yeah,
let's do it. Other thing I was thinking, so let's do that. But then I was thinking we need to give it it needs to be a thing. Like the well, see, this is a generational thing, because the phrase that I would use would be the good housekeeping seal of approval. But you guys might be too young.
No idea what you're talking about.
See?
No, it's interesting. So Tristan Harris at Time Well Spent is working on something like this, some kind of seal, like organic, or that this app is a time well spent app.
This company is so if you're a company that has implemented the the
use and abuse
guidelines, right? Then you get this, you're certified as the use and abuse, whatever. So just to kind of it's like a good citizen,
right?
And Guthrie, the good housekeeping seal of approval. This is I'm showing my age. I understand that. That's okay. I'm proud of my years of wisdom. The Good Housekeeping was an organization, and they had, and they still have, I think, a magazine, the Good Housekeeping magazine. And so, if a product was very good and had gone through, testing, kind of it's like a,
they got a seal of approval.
You would get a seal of approval. Okay. So if you had a kitchen appliance, that was reliable and worked well, it would have the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. And that term became used for anything like this, where you're just saying, okay, this company is a good citizen, or good to consumers. So Nir, I think we should work on this.
Yeah, I would love to see that happen.
It's very interesting.
we've launched it on our podcast. What are we going to call it?
I don't know. We'll figure something out. I think that Tristan, we should definitely work with Tristan at Time Well Spent around how to construct the seal. I think that's that to me is a little bit more troublesome, frankly. I mean, I don't have any problem with the seal. Why not? I guess I don't see it as big of a problem. Like I don't think that these apps are so bad that they're melting our brains for normal people.
Right.
They just stop using them, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like you did, Guthrie, where if the app was just using too much of your time, you scale back. What I want to see is really this one moral area that I don't think is gray. I think it's black and white. Particularly with addicts, with people who we have the data, we know who the addicts are, and we don't do anything for them. To me, I think that's something that needs more than a seal. I think it needs an industry agreement or maybe even regulation at some point.
I agree with you. No, I agree. That's what I meant though. What I meant was that but I think if you're gonna push for the regulation, you have to first
let the industry fix it or try to fix it.
No, I wasn't even going to say that, but just you've got to give them some ideas about what you mean and how to do it.
Yeah, I love it. If we could get a few companies, if we could get Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram to put, we could do a 2-for-1 there with Facebook now that they own Instagram, to help us with this and sign up. To agree to
that. We're putting this out there. So for those of you who are listening, if any of you are from these companies and are interested in some ideas about this, you can contact us and we'll get Nir involved.
Yeah, just email info@theteamw.com.
Yeah.
So I have two thoughts. It's first of all, it's so Nir, you're in San Francisco, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I completely because we're out in the Midwest, and I completely forget how basically the tech industry thinks it's really doing good on the planet. Like if you listen to all the companies, like we're here to make the world a better place. And if any of you have seen Silicon Valley, there's quite a wonderful parody about that whole thing. To the people I talk to, they have a much more sinister view of these tech companies, that they really, really just don't care about their users whatsoever. They're just trying to make money. So the example I'll give, there's video games that come out, and the video games, they're multiplayer, right? So you're playing against other people, and it looks super cool. And so they get all these people in, and sometimes the game even costs money to purchase. So all these people, they buy the game, they're playing it, it's a lot of fun. And then what these companies start doing is, to the users, it feels like they're holding them for ransom. Or I guess it's either that or a bait and switch, where then they introduce microtransactions. So if you pay extra, you can get special bullets that do more damage. And so the net effect is that the people who pay get to win every time. And if you don't pay, then you basically lose. And so these people, they've put in all this time and sometimes even money, and they feel that their time and money now is being held kind of at ransom, where either just forfeit all the investment you put into this game and just walk away, and thanks for your business, or you have to pay in order to do a decent job. So that's situations like that. Or companies that make the vast majority of their income on a very, very small subset of users.
Right. Well, again, I think that there's no doubt these firms are profit maximizers. That's what they're set up to do. But
yeah, Facebook, prove us wrong.
Well, I think the question is this a solution that the market figures out on its own? Like the fact that you and hundreds, if not thousands or hundreds of thousands of people have this complaint about the game, in the age we live in, that complaint is everywhere instantaneously, right? It's all over the forums. It's people bitching about it everywhere. And that's great, right? That's the free market working out shysters, right? If you think about dark patterns, there's a great website called darkpatterns.org that talks about all these techniques like bait and switch and roach motel, all these things that companies have done. The interesting thing is when you look at the dark patterns that companies partake in, almost all of them, without exception, either the technique is no longer used or the company's out of business.
Why is that? Money.
Why is that?
Somehow.
Because consumers complain and they stop buying those products. And so that's how I think these things typically get worked out. It's just bad business to trick your customers and make them feel like they're being coerced into something. People say, no, I'm not going to put up with that, and they stop buying your product. And so by and large, that's what happens, except for these areas, I think that the consumer is really and truly no longer in control, as in the case of fraud or in addiction.
Cool.
Hey, Nir.
Yeah.
I was right. We could have gone on for hours. You didn't even get to all the cool psychology stuff, so we may have to have you back on.
But we have an amazing charge here to try and implement these use and abuse policies.
Yes.
That's even better.
That's really exciting. So
yeah, that's new.
We're going to see if we can get that to go somewhere.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
And you guys heard it first.
That's right.
So, Nir, is there anything you want to plug?
Yeah. Where should people go to find out about you or get in touch with you, or besides buying the book Hooked?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, so the book is Hooked, and the website where I blog is at nirandfar.com. Nir is spelled like my first name, N-I-R, so nirandfar.com.
And again, for those listening, you can check all of our stuff at theteamw.com. This podcast will be everywhere, so you can download it. We're on all this social media stuff. Again, if you have any, if you are Sergey Brin, and you are listening and would like to get personally in touch with us, you can email us at info@theteamw.com. And I think that'll wrap it up. Nir, thanks so much for being on, and hopefully we can have you back.
Absolutely, it was fun.
Susan, thanks so much.
Yeah.
And to all those listening, I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks.